Hi everyone, welcome to Azad Revenge Stories channel. My name is Monica Perry. I'm 32, and I've been the one keeping my family afloat until my sister snapped. "You're a selfish jerk, Monica," she yelled, grabbing a glass of water and hurling it in my face. The cold splash stung, soaking my shirt as our mom stood frozen at the dining table in our Denver home. It was a family dinner turned nightmare, all because I refused to hand over $35,000, my life savings, to cover her gambling debts. My heart raced, but I didn't back down. "I've paid your bills for years," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done." She leaned across the table, her eyes blazing. "You owe me, Monica Oe." Her all she'd ever done was lie and gamble, dragging our family into her chaos. That splash of water was the last straw. She thought she could guilt me into submission. But she was dead wrong. If family drama hits close to home, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. This story gets crazier, and you won't want to miss it. I teach third grade in Denver, Colorado, living in a small apartment a few miles from our family's two-story house in the suburbs. That house, where my sister Tiffany Perry and my mom, Deborah Perry, still live, has been my burden for the past 5 years. I've been paying the mortgage ever since Tiffany's gambling addiction spiraled out of control. She's 36, 4 years older than me, and has always been the reckless one. Casinos, online betting, shady loan sharks. It got worse after our dad died 6 years ago. Tiffany would show up at my place, tears, screaming, swearing she'd quit if I just bailed her out one last time. So I did. I cleared her credit card debts, paid off her car, even settled with collectors when they started hounding her. Each time, I told myself I was helping my family for Tiffany, for Mom, who couldn't stand seeing her favorite daughter hit rock bottom. My mom, Deborah Perry, has always put Tiffany on a pedestal. Growing up, Tiffany was the star, charming, fearless, always stealing the spotlight. I was the dependable one, cleaning up her messes while Mom made excuses. "Tiffany's just passionate," she'd say, waving off another one of my sister's disasters. When Tiffany's gambling got out of hand, Mom didn't push her to get help. She leaned on me. "Monica, you're so responsible," she'd say, her voice soft but insistent. "Can't you help your sister?" So I kept paying, draining my savings, shelving my plans, a master's degree, a trip somewhere far away to keep the family afloat. I thought that's what love meant. But really, I was just sinking under Tiffany's weight. That night at Mom's dining table, the one we'd had since I was a kid, Tiffany crossed a line. She'd asked for money before, but never like this. "Monica, I need $35,000, she said, picking at her food like it was no big deal. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Tiffany, that's my entire savings," I said, keeping my tone even. "I can't do that." Her eyes narrowed and she slammed her hand on the table. "Current or what?" she hissed. Mom fidgeted, glancing between us. "Monica, maybe you could." She started, but I cut her off. "No, Mom. I've covered her debts, her bills, everything. I'm done." That's when Tiffany grabbed her glass and threw the water at me. It hit like a slap, soaking my face and shirt. The room went dead quiet except for the drip of water on the floor. Mom just stared at her plate, avoiding my eyes. Tiffany leaned in, her voice sharp. "You think you're above me, Monica. You owe me." My hand shook as I wiped my face, but I stood up. "I don't owe you a dime," I said, and walked out, my clothes dripping, my pulse racing. I didn't know where I'd go, but I couldn't stay in that house. I drove straight to the apartment of my friend Gregory Lane. He's a lawyer, 33, and has been my anchor since our college days. Always calm, always cutting through the noise. When I showed up, still wet and fuming, he didn't blink. He handed me a towel, poured me coffee, and said, "Spill it." So I told him everything: Tiffany's gambling, the years of bailing her out, Mom's endless excuses, and that dinner, the water, the $35,000. Gregory listened, to his face hard, and when I was done, he leaned forward. "Monica, she's been using you," he said. "You're not her ATM." His words stung, but they were true. I'd spent years playing the fixer, thinking it was my duty. But I wasn't fixing anything. I was letting Tiffany drag me down. Lying on Gregory's couch that night, I couldn't shut my brain off. Tiffany's voice echoed, "You owe me for what?" Her lies, her debts. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. I'd sacrificed so much, my savings, my dreams, my peace to keep her from crashing, and she repaid me with a face full of water. But something else was eating at me. A few weeks back, I'd gotten a call from a debt collector about a credit card I didn't open. I thought it was a mix-up, but now with Tiffany's desperation fresh in my mind, I wasn't so sure. Had she crossed an even bigger line? I didn't have proof, but the suspicion was enough to keep me awake. The next morning, over eggs and toast, Gregory slid a notepad across the table. "Write it all down," he said, his tone firm. "Every payment you've made for Tiffany, every time she's begged for cash. If she's playing dirty, you need to protect yourself." I nodded, my hand still shaky from the night before. I didn't know what I was stepping into, but something inside me had shifted. For years, I'd let Tiffany's chaos control me. No more. Whatever she was hiding, whatever came next, I was ready to face it. I started by calling the debt collector who'd left a message weeks ago about a credit card I didn't know existed. My hand shook as I dialed, but I had to know. The woman on the other end was curt, listing off details: a card opened in my name, maxed out at $8,000, registered to an address I hadn't lived at in years. My stomach churned. It was Tiffany's old apartment. I pressed her, my voice barely steady. "When was this opened?" She checked. 2 years ago. Right when Tiffany had talked me into a small loan to get her life together. I hung up, my head spinning. Tiffany wasn't just begging for cash. She was stealing my identity, racking up debts in my name. I sped to Gregory's law office, my thoughts racing. He was in a meeting, but one look at my face and he ushered me into a private room. "Tarp," he said, pen ready. I laid it out: the card, the address, the timing. His eyes narrowed as he took notes. "Moniker, this is straight up fraud," he said, his voice low and serious. "We need to pull your credit report, check for other accounts, and build a case. This isn't just a mistake." I nodded, but my heart felt like it was being squeezed. Fraud. My sister had crossed a line I didn't think possible. Back at my place, I tore through my bank account, my fingers trembling as I combed 3 years of statements. Gregory had told me to look for anything suspicious, and I found it: small transfers. I'd ignored payments to accounts I didn't recognize. One went to a casino Tiffany frequented, another tied to a sketchy loan company she'd mentioned in passing. It wasn't one card she'd opened. At least two, maybe more, piling up thousands in my name. I felt like I'd been punched, not just by the money, but by the realization she'd been deceiving me for years, smiling while she bled me dry. I wanted to storm her apartment and demand answers, but Gregory's advice held me back. "Get the proof first." So I buckled down. I printed bank statements, saved screenshots of shady transfers, pulled up old texts where Tiffany spun lies about needing emergency funds. Each piece was like a slap, evidence of how she'd used my trust to fuel her gambling. But with every document, my shock turned to anger, not just at her, but at myself for letting her get away with it for so long. That evening, my mom, Deborah, called. I hadn't spoken to her since that awful dinner, and I wasn't in the mood, but I picked up. "Moniker, we need to talk about your sister," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar guilt-trip tone. "She's going through a lot. She didn't mean to upset you." I clenched the phone, my jaw tight. "Mom," she demanded $35,000 and threw water in my face when I refused. I said, struggling to stay calm. "And now I know she's been opening credit cards in my name. She's committing fraud." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Moniker, you know she's had it rough." Deborah said, "She's not perfect, but she's your sister. Can't you just move past this?" Move past it. I was floored. "Mom, she's stealing from me," I said, my voice rising. "She's ruining my credit, my life. How can you defend her?" Deborah's tone turned sharp. "Don't snap at me, Moniker. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. She needs help, not your accusations." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to yell. This was Deborah, always protecting Tiffany, always brushing me off. "I'm not cleaning up her mess anymore," I said, my voice cold. "She needs to own this." I hung up, my hands shaking. That call hit me hard. I'd spent years holding my family together, thinking it was my responsibility. I'd paid their bills, swallowed their lies, all because I thought that's what family did. But this wasn't family. This was me drowning while they watched. At my kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence, I felt a tangle of emotions: rage at Tiffany, hurt from Deborah's denial, guilt for even considering fighting back. Part of me wanted to give Tiffany another chance to believe she'd change like I'd always hoped. But a louder part, at the part fed up with being used, was taking over. I couldn't keep going like this. The next day, I met Gregory at a coffee shop to go over my evidence. He flipped through my documents, statements, texts, credit reports, his expression dark. "This is airtight, Moniker," he said, tapping the pile. "She's been methodical probably for years. We can file a fraud report, maybe pursue charges." Charges. The word felt heavy. Could I really drag my sister to court, rip our family apart? I looked at Gregory, my throat tight. "I don't know if I can go that far," I said. "She's my sister. Mom will hate me." He leaned forward, his voice steady. "Moniker, she's betting on your guilt to keep you silent. Don't let her win." His words stayed with me, but so did the guilt. That night alone in my apartment, I kept hearing Deborah's voice. "She's your sister." I thought about all the times I'd helped Tiffany, hoping she'd turn things around. I thought about Mom always choosing Tiffany even now. But I also thought about myself, my job, my dreams, the life I'd put on hold to fix their chaos. For the first time, I asked what I deserved. Not what Tiffany needed, not what Mom wanted, but what I needed. And it was clear I needed to stop being their doormat. I grabbed Gregory's notepad and kept writing not just evidence, but every moment Tiffany had lied. Every time Mom had turned a blind eye. It was like peeling back a lie I'd lived with for years. I didn't know if I'd face Tiffany head on, go to the police, or do something else. But I knew I was done staying quiet. Tiffany had pushed me too far, and I was ready to fight back. Over the next few days, Gregory and I worked like detectives. He showed me how to pull detailed credit reports, cross-CH check transactions, and even track down a second fraudulent card Tiffany had opened in my name, this one with a $5,000 balance. We found emails from loan companies, one addressed to me, but sent to Tiffany's account demanding payment for a debt I didn't owe. Each document was another nail in the coffin of her betrayal. "This is enough to bury her in court," Gregory said, stacking the papers in his office. "But you need to confront her, Moniker. She has to know you're serious." I nodded, my stomach twisting. Confronting Tiffany meant facing my mom, Deborah, too, and her endless defense of my sister. I spent hours organizing the evidence, printouts of bank records, screenshots of texts where Tiffany promised to pay me back soon, even a signed loan agreement she'd forged with my name. It was overwhelming seeing years of her deception laid out in black and white, but it also lit a fire in me. She'd used me, lied to me, and now she was banking on my silence to keep her scam going. I wasn't going to let her. That Friday, I drove to Deborah's house, the evidence stuffed in a folder under my arm. My hands were clammy as I pulled into the driveway. I hadn't been back since the night Tiffany threw water in my face, and the thought of seeing her again made my pulse race. But I couldn't back out now. I knocked and Deborah answered, her face tightening when she saw me. "Moniker, what's this about?" she asked, her voice weary. "I need to talk to Tiffany," I said, clutching the folder. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Tiffany was in the living room, sprawled on the couch, scrolling her phone like nothing was wrong. "Tiffany, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What now, Moniker?" she said, her tone dripping with annoyance. I set the folder on the coffee table, my hands trembling. "I know about the credit cards," I said. "The ones you opened in my name. $8,000, $5,000, maybe more. You've been stealing from me." Her face froze for a split second. Then she laughed a sharp, bitter sound. "Stealing? You're so dramatic," she said, sitting up. "I was going to pay it back. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Pay it back?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me for years, Tiffany, using my name, my credit to fund your gambling. How is that not stealing?" Deborah stepped in, her hands raised. Monica, calm down, she said, her voice sharp. Your sister's struggling. You don't need to attack her. I turned to her, my heart pounding. Mom, she's committing fraud, I said. She's ruining my life, and you're still defending her. Tiffany jumped up, her face red. You think you're so perfect, Monica, she shouted, always playing the martyr, acting like you're better than me. I needed that money, needed it for what I shot back. More casinos, more lies. I opened the folder, spreading the papers across the table. Bank statements, credit reports, forged agreements. This is what you've done to me, I said, pointing at the evidence. And I'm not letting it go. Tiffany's eyes flicked to the papers, and for a moment I saw panic. But then she smirked. You're really going to turn on your own sister, she said. You'll destroy this family, Monica. Deborah grabbed my arm, her voice low. Monica, stop this, she said. We can work it out. Don't do something you'll regret. I pulled away, my chest tight. I'm not the one who should regret anything, I said, looking at Tiffany. You did this. You fix it. I turned to Deborah, my voice breaking. And Mom, you've let her get away with this for years. I'm done being the one who pays for it. I grabbed my folder and walked out, their voices. Tiffany's shouting, Deborah's pleading fading behind me. My hands shook as I got in my car, but I felt a strange clarity. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking control. Back at Gregory's office, I showed him the confrontation's aftermath. She didn't even deny it. I said, my voice raw. She just turned it around, made me the bad guy. He nodded, flipping through the evidence again. That's what manipulators do, he said. But this, he tapped the folder. This is your power. We can file a fraud report now, maybe escalate to charges. It's your call. I swallowed the weight of his words sinking in. Taking Tiffany to court would mean burning bridges, not just with her, but with Deborah. I'd spent my life trying to keep our family together, and now I was the one tearing it apart. The guilt was crushing, but so was the truth. Tiffany wasn't going to stop, unless I made her. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat with the folder, staring at the evidence of Tiffany's lies. I kept replaying the confrontation, her smirk, Deborah's pleas, the way they both turned on me. Part of me wanted to call Deborah, to apologize, to make it right. But why? So Tiffany could keep using me, so Deborah could keep excusing her. I thought about my life, my job, my dreams, the years I'd sacrificed to clean up their messes. I deserved better. I deserved a life that wasn't defined by their chaos. The next morning, I called Gregory. I want to move forward, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. File the fraud report. Whatever it takes. He didn't hesitate. Good, he said. I'll start drafting the paperwork. But Monica, this might get messy. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, thinking of Tiffany's smirk, Deborah's denial, and the stack of evidence in my hands. I'm ready, I said. I wasn't sure if I believed it, but I knew I couldn't turn back. Tiffany had pushed me too far, and now I was pushing back harder than she ever expected. The confrontation with Tiffany had left me shaking, her smirk and Deborah's pleas burning in my mind. But I was done being their pawn. With Gregory's help, I'd built a fortress of evidence, bank statements, forged agreements, texts exposing her lies. It was time to lay it all bare and end this once and for all. I called Gregory the next day, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I want to do this in front of them, I said. Tiffany, Deborah, all of it out in the open. He paused, then agreed. It's risky, Monica, but it'll force them to face the truth. I'll be there. We set a plan to meet at Deborah's house that weekend. I spent the days leading up preparing, double-checking every document, the $8,000 credit card, the $5,001, the fake loan agreements Tiffany had signed in my name. Each piece fueled my resolve, but the guilt still nodded at me. This wasn't just about money. It was about breaking my family apart. Saturday evening, I pulled into Deborah's driveway. Gregory beside me, the folder of evidence in my lap. My heart pounded as I knocked. Deborah opened the door, her face weary. Monica, what's going on? She asked, glancing at Gregory. We need to talk, I said, stepping inside. Tiffany was in the living room, lounging on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. What's this, Monica? Another lecture, she said, her tone sharp. I set the folder on the coffee table, my hands steady now. No lecture, I said. Just the truth. I opened the folder, spreading the papers across the table. Credit reports, bank statements, screenshots of her texts. You've been opening credit cards in my name, I said, my voice calm but firm. $8,000, $5,000, fake loans, all in my name to fund your gambling. Tiffany's face went pale, but only for a moment. She laughed a cold, brittle sound. You're paranoid, Monica, she said, leaning back. Those are mistakes. I'd never do that to you. I pointed to a forged agreement with her signature. Mistakes don't sign my name. I said you did this. Deborah stepped forward, her hands trembling. Monica, stop, she said, her voice low. You're accusing your sister of something awful. Can't we just talk this out? I turned to her, my chest tight. Mom, I've tried talking, I said. For years I've paid her debts, believed her lies while you made excuses. Look at this. I pushed the papers toward her. She's been stealing from me. Deborah's eyes flicked to the documents, and for the first time I saw doubt. She picked up a credit report, her face crumpling as she read. Tiffany, is this true? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tiffany jumped up, her face red. Don't listen to her, Mom, she shouted. Monica's just trying to tear us apart. She's always been jealous, always wanted to play the victim. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. Jealous, I said, my voice rising. I've spent years cleaning up your messes, Tiffany. Your gambling, your debts, your lies, and now you've dragged me into your fraud. I'm done. Gregory stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Tiffany, the evidence is clear, he said, pointing to the papers. You've committed fraud. Monica's filing a report, and it could mean charges. Tiffany's eyes widened, and she turned to Deborah, her voice desperate. Mom, you can't let her do this. I'm your daughter. Deborah looked between us, her face torn. Monica, you're going too far, she said, but her voice wavered. She's your sister. We're family. I shook my head, my throat tight. Family doesn't steal from you, Mom, I said. Family doesn't let you drown to save someone else's lives. Deborah's eyes filled with tears. And then, to my shock, she turned to Tiffany. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice breaking. How could you do this to Monica? Tiffany froze, her face crumbling. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she muttered, but it sounded hollow. I didn't wait for more excuses. I'm filing the fraud report, I said, looking at Tiffany. This ends now. I grabbed the folder and walked out with Gregory, their voices, Tiffany's shouts, Deborah's sobs fading behind me. My heart was racing, but I felt a weight lift. I'd faced them, and I hadn't backed down. The next week, Gregory helped me file the fraud report with the police. We submitted every piece of evidence, statements, texts, forged documents. The officer was blunt. This is a strong case, he said. You'll likely recover most of the money, but it'll take time. A few days later, the credit agencies froze the fraudulent accounts, and I got back a portion of my savings, enough to breathe again. But the victory felt bittersweet. Tiffany stopped calling, her silence louder than her excuses. Deborah left voicemails, her voice heavy with guilt. Monica, I didn't know how bad it was, she said in one. I'm sorry. I should have listened. It was the first time she'd ever apologized, and it hit me harder than I expected. But even with her apology, I knew things couldn't go back. I'd spent years tying myself to their chaos, thinking it was love. It wasn't. Love doesn't demand your life to prop up someone else's lives. I started working with a realtor to sell the family house, the one I'd paid for all those years. It wasn't just about the money. It was about cutting the last tie to Tiffany's mess. Gregory warned me it might get messy if Tiffany fought back. But I was ready. She can try. I told him, I'm not the one running from the truth anymore. That night alone in my apartment, I sat with the reality of what I'd done. I'd stood up to Tiffany, exposed her lies, and forced Deborah to see the truth. But I'd also lost the family I'd fought so hard to keep together. The guilt was still there, whispering that I'd gone too far, that I'd broken something unfixable. But there was another voice, now stronger, reminding me of what I'd gained: control, clarity, a chance to live for myself. I thought about the house, the fraud report, the apology from Deborah. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward, not just surviving. The fraud case moved faster than I expected. Gregory worked tirelessly submitting our evidence, bank statements, forged agreements, texts, exposing Tiffany's lies to the police and credit agencies. A month later, the officer handling the case called. "We've got enough to move forward," he said. "The accounts in your name are being closed, and you'll recover most of the money, about $10,000 of the $13,000 she racked up." It wasn't everything, but it was enough to rebuild. The court also issued a restraining order against Tiffany, barring her from contacting me. I'd won legally at least, but the emotional toll was heavier than I'd imagined. Tiffany's silence wasn't the victory I'd hoped for. It felt like a void. She didn't stay silent for long. A week after the court ruling, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Monica, how could you do this to me?" It read, "I'm your sister. You've ruined my life." Classic Tiffany turning the tables, making herself the victim. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to fire back to list every lie, every dollar she'd stolen, but I didn't. I blocked her number, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I was done letting her guilt trip me into her chaos. Deborah was harder to shake. She called a few days after the ruling, her voice soft and shaky. "Monica, I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize how far Tiffany had gone. I should have stood up for you." It was the apology I'd waited years to hear, but it felt hollow. For so long, she'd chosen Tiffany over me, excusing her lies while I paid the price. "Mom, I appreciate that," I said, my voice calm but firm, "but I need space. I can't keep fixing this family." She paused, then whispered, "I understand." I hung up, my heart heavy but certain. Deborah might change, but I wasn't banking on it. I needed to protect myself first. Selling the family house was the final step. I'd been paying the mortgage for years, tying myself to a place filled with memories of Tiffany's betrayal and Deborah's denial. Working with the realtor was strangely liberating. We listed the house, a two-story suburban home in Denver, for a fair price, and it sold within weeks. I split the proceeds with Deborah, sending her a check with a short note. "This is for you to start over." I'm doing the same. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. That house had been a symbol of my sacrifices, and letting it go felt like cutting the last chain. With the money from the sale and the recovered funds, I had enough to start fresh. I packed my bags and moved to Portland, Oregon, a city I'd always dreamed of exploring. The move wasn't just about distance. It was about reclaiming my life. In Denver, I'd been Monica the fixer, the sister who paid for Tiffany's mistakes, the daughter who kept Deborah's world together. In Portland, I was just Monica. I rented a small apartment with a view of the city skyline, signed up for a writing workshop, and started working on a children's book, something I'd wanted to do since I was a kid. Every word I wrote felt like a step toward a version of myself I'd buried for years. The first few weeks in Portland were quiet, almost too quiet. I kept expecting my phone to buzz with Tiffany's demands or Deborah's pleas, but it didn't. The silence was strange but freeing. I spent my weekends hiking in Forest Park, the fresh air clearing my head in a way Denver never had. One evening, as I sat in a cozy cafe drafting my book, I caught myself smiling, really smiling for the first time in years. It wasn't just the coffee or the story taking shape. It was the realization that I was living for me, not for their chaos. Gregory flew out to visit a month after I settled in. Over dinner, he raised a glass. "To Monica," he said, "grinning for taking your life back." I laughed, clinking my glass against his. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. He shook his head. "You did this, Monica. You stood up to them. That's all you." His words hit deep. For years, I defined myself by what I did for others, paying their bills, swallowing their lives. Now I was defining myself by what I chose for me. Looking back, I still felt a pang of sadness. Tiffany hadn't changed. She was still out there, probably spinning new lies, chasing new debts. Deborah's apology was a start, but it didn't erase the years she'd looked the other way. Part of me hoped they'd find their way, but I wasn't holding my breath. Change had to come from them, not me. I'd given them enough chances. enough pieces of myself. Now I was keeping those pieces for me. One night, as I sat on my balcony watching Portland's lights twinkle, I thought about everything. The water in my face, the lies, the evidence, the fight. It had all felt like quicksand pulling me under, but I'd climbed out. I'd lost the family I thought I had, but I'd gained something better myself. I picked up my notebook, jotting down a line from my book. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. It wasn't just a story for kids. It was my story. For the first time, it felt like mine to you. I invite you to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me further by hitting the hype button so the story in this video can be heard by many more people. Thanks to all.